In a country like ours, I think one of the fundamental rights is education, should remain education. And the numbers are staggering. I'm not going to go into the size of the business or the revenue and so on. But the fact that as the world's most populous country, with 25% of that number going to be in schools at any given time, we are sitting in a festival, and there are many festivals, where readership is key, having readers is key. And to have readers and readership, the quality of literacy and numeracy teaching and education at a child's level is going to be an important aspect for the future. In 2050, we'll be a 2 billion people company, which means a country, which means that at 25%, the chances of 500 million children to be educated and educated well is a very large responsibility. I'm very delighted that the panel is just super experienced, between them more than 100 years, I would think, of because they work more than 70 hours a week, of more than 100 years of education experience, two perspectives, curriculum-based publishing, especially in English language and science and maths, innovative, grassroots level outreach programs to increase readership and so on. I'm going to start with Himanshu, because Pratham does what is called the annual, the essay report, Status of Education report, which assesses what exactly happens in education teaching in India, but also the capacity requirement and so on. And they do various innovative outreach programs, especially in the lower economic group of children who don't have access to private education. So Himanshu, talk us through the status as it were in education teaching in India, what the key learnings are, and what Pratham is doing from an outreach point of view to reach that population.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. So, Asar, like you said, Ananth, I think is the largest people-led survey in the country. It happens in about little over 600 plus rural districts of India, and done by about 30,000 plus volunteers. What it kind of broadly captures is the essence of what gets transacted into the classrooms. How are teachers teaching? What is that children are learning? Where are the gaps? I think over the years, what has come into as one of the key learnings is that children are not able to read. There are reading disabilities in the classrooms. While I think all of us aspire that children should become avid readers, if I wear my joyful reading hat, we only have 40 minutes of one library period, right? And the expectation is an avid reader. We don't have access to good quality children's literature. We don't promote reading beyond textbooks. So I think as far as we at Pratham and Pratham Books, I would say we see that there's a tremendous scope to build. And the landscape which Ananth was explaining as 25%, let me put a number there. We have about 270 million K-12 school-going children in our country. So that's the scope. We live in a country with over 5 million schools, which includes about 2.5 million government schools and preschools. So when you have these numbers with you, the scope is tremendous, and no wonder I think Ananth has been part of, with the Nielsen report and the survey, the 96% of the focus is academic publishing. But we still see that, there's, the learning is really not happening. So I think what we're doing as Pratham Books is also, we were born out of a need for good quality children's literature, providing children books in their own mother tongue. Because a lot of researchers have also proven that if children in their early years read in their mother tongue, they become better performers in life in whatever they do. Everything is important, and I think if you look at the educational scenario, the NEP 2020, it focuses on use of local language. So we're trying to promote lot of reading-related promotional activities across the schools, and like you rightly said, at the bottom of the pyramid. where children do not, the access is not there, affordability is not there. So there we're trying to kind of create an.
Thank you for that. And a good segue to NEP. So Atiya ji, the national education policy paints itself as being progressive, has talked about infrastructure requirement, human resource requirement, what the government's vision on what it means to educate such a large populace. And after 15 years, they've also announced, as late as October 2023, we had the national curriculum framework being rolled out, which fortunately moved away from, at least in intent, rote learning method.
On paper.
On paper. Digital learning and teaching, what it means for comprehension, what it means for curriculum, what it means for pedagogy, and they rolled out a new NCF. Now, you've been publishing books, textbooks, and in all things considered, active learning and active child development happens inside of a classroom. And so if a child is learning to construct a sentence, it boils down to that textbook. Wants to understand a concept in algebra, it boils down to that textbook that you publish, and how, as a vision for your textbook, you're training the teachers and the classroom and the child. Is the NCF going to deliver that promise? And what's your experience over the last 20 years? Because 25-year-olds now are very smart. So one could argue that there's been nothing wrong with the education at all. They've all been going to school in the same country.
Unfortunately, the segment we cater to, it's a small segment, middle class, upper middle class. Those schools like the DPSs and the Lortos, and there's the books we make for, because they are good books, well printed on good paper and good illustrations. So we have to end up paying that price. We don't reach the school which Himanshu reaches. So in that segment, when this NEP and then later the NCF came out, I asked my young editors, could you see what's the difference between a 40-year-old living science and James English reader and the new NCF? I said, ma'am, everything they've asked for is there in our books.
Sure.
The original NCF, the one before that, the one before that, the one which Maulana Azad launched, is the same. I mean, the basic principles of pedagogy, critical thinking, application of knowledge, collaborative work, communication, and all those things, they were all there. So what do we change in these books? I said, we just put a label. This is critical thinking, because the teacher won't know. And in schools, they want labels. So those fly-by-night operators, there are many in every small city, some bookseller, some publisher comes overnight. They keep these books, their books, and they make textbooks. There they'll mark over there, as per NCF. But the NCF is, I mean, why in India, go back to Aristotle, go back to Socrates and Gijubai Bhateka and Radhakrishnan and Mahatma Gandhi, is the same. It's much more verbose, in very kind of hi-fi technical language. So there's actually nothing much there. Stress on rote learning has been discouraged since Maria Montessori, since Gijubai, since Tagore. The only thing which is new is basically stress on technology in the classroom. That obviously now technology is there, so after 25 years they would stress on that. Otherwise, interactive learning, and our books, they sell in numbers, like if a book is selling about 50,000 per year, per class, it's not a success. It has to be something around 1 lakh copies a year. That will be a successful book. So even if we print Ruskin Bond, we printed Ruskin Bond about 30 years back, and it would sell 2,000, 3,000 in a year, I think, in beauty also. And one tiny state in India, Meghalaya, selected those books for their state board. 23,000 copies at a go. So and for 5 years, there are 2 books of Ruskin Bond and 1 of Sigrun Srivastava. So Ruskin Bond called up and said, all my publishers put together have never given me so much of royalty as you all have given me in 2-3 years. So that's, if there's a government stamp on a book, it will sell. Otherwise, you have to sell exactly based on the syllabus, the books which are there, the syllabus which has been outlined, and there are gaps in learning. For a 8-9-year-old, you can explain a microscope. A microscope shows us tiny organisms which we cannot see with the naked eye. That's how as far as the textbook will go. Himanshu will print a book of 15 pages, beautifully illustrated, on under the microscope. So he is filling in a gap where the textbooks cannot, because they're limited syllabus. You have to be in the confines of that syllabus. Limited number of pages, the price, there's tough competition. If his books are priced at one point, then we have to, and then they'll say, no, your books, they're very nice, but they're 100 rupees more than the ex-publisher's book. So we won't, I'm sorry, we won't be able to take your books. That's what parents and teachers and principals are. Forget about the publishers. So I say 100 rupees is not even 10 rupees a month.
Yeah.
You can buy a pizza for 250 rupees at the drop of a hat, but they cannot. So the price point is very sensitive.
I think the point you're raising, there are two aspects to the conversation we're having here. One is that economic diversity is humongous in India. It cannot be ignored at all. It is important for the Sri Ram school and the DPSs of the world, but it's also equally important. I mean, Delhi,
much more important.
Delhi alone, Delhi NCR is many Indias, as it were, as a very unique entity.
Like I just told you, this school in Khuraji, one part of Delhi, they do not have a tap of drinking water inside the school. It's a government school, I think. So this children have to go across the road. There's a tap on the footpath across the road to drink water. One child was crossing the road and was run over by a truck. And here we talk of digital learning in Barabanki and Bhatinda and Belgaum. I mean, it's a distant dream.
Yeah, no, India is many
Yeah.
Indias. I'm going to switch to you, Himanshu, for a bit. You run more than 1,000 outreach programs especially for children who don't have access to private schools, who don't. I always argue as a textbook publisher too, like there is the environment to which we will publish curriculum-based textbooks, but is there a need for curriculum, or is there need for high-quality literacy and numeracy teaching at a foundational level? Are we making our children commonsensical, smart, to be able to communicate well? Your outreach programs have dramatically changed what happens in the invisible learning sphere. We all talk about private cities and big cities. Talk us through Pratham's outreach programs. How do you structure it? What the thought that goes behind creating those programs?
Let me start with Jaipur Literature Festival, I think, because I think we are celebrating 14 years of outreach this year, and Pratham Books celebrates 20 years of celebrating reading. So I think I still remember 14 years back, Sanjoy and I were sitting and we said that, and I think Manisha and we were together, and we said that, how do we, how many people come to the festival, like Jaipur Literature Festival as speakers? They said about maybe 250, 300 those days. I mean, maybe a lesser number. I said, so how many sessions? 3 sessions on an average, or 2.5. I said, what do they do the other time? Maybe move around, attend other sessions, go see Jaipur, travel to Ajmer, Pushkar, and things like that. I said, can we utilize these resources, people who are coming from various walks of life, and take it to the children who will never have the opportunity to visit such festivals? So I think that has always been our premise, to take the resources who could be inspiration. And it's not only the award-winning authors or illustrators. We've hosted military historians, TV anchors, radio jockeys, award-winning journalists talk about the courage of journalism amongst the senior school students to take up. I mean, gone are the days science, maths ke alawa kuch hota nahi tha. Abhi to, the sports personalities are taken to create, good that Sachin Tendulkar was born, and people thought that this maybe Indian Idol was born, that there is a scope. So I think those are the inspirations with which we kind of get into the outreach and try and reach to that last mile child. But having said that, and if I was to answer, Ananth, your question around what is more needed, I think it's a mixed bag. It's not an either-or situation. If you say whether it is joyful learning or textbook, I think textbooks have to be joyful.
Mine are.
Yeah. I would appreciate, like how Atiya said that, it's Pratham Books or the joyful reading, whosoever in that space exists, who is publishing for children for joyful reading, is complementing the education sector in building the base for it. So I don't think we can live as an either or. It has to really complement, supplement each other. And there are many things I would say, especially I want to quote here that somewhere back in 2014, we, based on some research around STEM, we said, and especially maths and science being daunting subjects, children want to run away and not perform. We thought, we realized, can we really storify STEM? And when we storified STEM, and I can tell you, I mean, we really have these researches of things done in Kota and a couple of them in southern parts of India, the interest level when the same climate, energy, whatever kind of a story or a chapter was talked about, with the 40 minutes and 5 minutes being spent in the classroom using a storybook, the engagement level was 400% up. And tell me how, tell me why. The child who never used to speak up in the classroom, the child who's never interacted with the parent and questioned a parent started questioning. All of that showed. And I was just telling Ananth that, that time, and even today, it is so important that, and reports have proven that if children do not acquire good STEM skills, employability will become an issue with them when they grow up. So I would leave with that, yeah.
Yeah, no, good segue, because I think one of the purposes.
Very unique things or restrictions we can see. First, textbook publishers. Number one is, we get a chance once a year to sell our books.
Sure.
We spend the whole year preparing those books like a farmer does. And if something like COVID happens, then your whole puri fasal kharab ho jati hai. Books just don't, schools just shut down. And books are, go downs are full of books. But again, being textbook publishers, we bounce back in a couple of years because textbooks will always sell. The second thing, that sad thing is societal pressure, parental pressure. In one of our history books, the lesson was called Akbar the Great. It's called in, I think, all school books, they used to say that, including NCERT. We got very strong complaints, objections, abusive mails. Akbar was not great. He killed so many Hindus, he did this, he did that. So please stop calling him great. In that light, recently we had one of our successful books of English readers. It had a lesson since the last 20 years. It's called Birbal Meets, what's his name? Birbal Meets Babar, yeah. So there it's a very cute lesson when actually Birbal meets Babar. Birbal, this year we were revising it. I said, please change this Birbal, make it the emperor. We won't change anything else. We'll keep the story, we'll keep it the emperor. We won't put the name Birbal in there. Anticipating societal pressure, anticipating maybe your books are burnt or something happens. Or these things happen.
History.
That's a very big thing.
History
even
in
social
India.
Sciences.
History teaching, history writing in India needs a festival for itself with armed guards outside, I think, if we want to speak our minds.
Anand, in one of our books, we have twins girls, they are called Maya and Zoya. Nothing else, just two names, Maya and Zoya. And they do various things from grade 1 to grade 8. How can they be twins? How can you write something like this?
Sure.
How
No,
can,
the purpose,
so
I'm going to
those
go.
are great restrictions, and yet school books will always sell.
Yes. So I'm going to go to that. A very fundamental link in the education is teacher, the guru.
Yeah.
Yes. So one of the things that we learn every time we go to a school, and for those who are not in the education business, that is the teacher who evaluates the textbooks that the publishers publish and then chooses them to be adopted into the school.
In an ideal world.
In an ideal world. And he or she then has to execute the textbook, teach the textbook to the classroom and so on. But candidly, if you can, do we have that teaching environment that can teach 300 to 500 million children? Is everything how much is lost in translation when your vision for a textbook or when your vision for storifying STEM, we can all sit here and do stuff. Does it translate inside the classroom? We all talk about digital, everybody has a device, but in the actual teaching environment, I think less than 5% children have access to digital learning outcomes.
Absolutely.
Do we have good teachers? And as a publisher between the both of you, how much of your energy do you spend on training the teacher?
We train 1 lakh teachers in a year, but that's just a dot.
Exactly.
teaching is the, unfortunately, the last choice. If you don't get into IAS, if you don't get into a bank exam, if you don't get into a call center, acha chalo, you'll become a teacher. That's a choice also, and a kind of a majburi. And bureaucrats' wives and bank officers' wives, 3 years they'll get transferred. So I've been getting transferred from Patna to Bombay. He'll work there for 3 years, move to Hyderabad, work there for 3 years. So those teachers, unfortunately, don't have that zeal, that missionary zeal, ki I'm a teacher by choice. They are teacher because they are there and they have to do something, maybe add to the kitty. So that's then trainings. I mean, training we do about, and any given day there'll be 3 or 4 workshops happening anywhere in India, somewhere in India. Teaching English, teaching science, classroom management, time management, empowering the teacher, those kind of stuff. Maybe out of a 50, 60, 5 or 6, carry away something.
Himanshu?
Yeah, so I agree with Atiya ji that, one is that training is very essential, but I think we also should understand how it is really getting transacted post that. I mean, we do actually, when we do trainings of non-academic nature, and let's say if we were to interact with a librarian, that how do you transact with a storybook? We would really go and understand and go back to the ground, respond back to the ground in terms of the challenges they face. But the reality is that, it's tough and it is a continuous process and it cannot be a one-time affair. Secondly, to your question about the digital infrastructure and things, I think that while we have the largest digital platform in the world with 60,000 books, 350 languages, etc., but having said that, I don't think, that's my personal opinion, is that digital content use is just a spin of a newness that a child would need. So as a child, I may say that today I want to read, tomorrow I want to listen, the third day I want to watch. That's it. If you think that only digital to digital will deliver the required outcome, I don't think we are ready. I don't think that should be it has to be a hand-in-hand approach. If Atiya ji said that there is a chapter which is 4 pages and the under the microscope can be learned through a one-pager story, we need to find maybe digital mediums kind of adding on to that.
But how many children have access to a digital medium? There's no connectivity, there's no...
So I will answer that. In fact, the recent ASAR report of 2023 was focused on children between 14 to 18 years. And interestingly, 90% of the children have access to digital devices. See, we are a country where at about 1.25 billion mobile subscribers as I speak, and we are 1.4. So we are there in some manner and shape.
But education being delivered into that device.
I was about to say that.
Not the exam knowledge.
So one is, it has to be an absolute intent of the teacher as well as the student. We have Teach for India fellows who use the mobile phones and the technology beautifully to deliver the stories in the classrooms. But that's a different need and the cause and the purpose. But if you ask a teacher to use that in the classrooms, it would become a serious issue. Having said that, there are states who are really taking initiatives. If you really look at Telangana, which has really moved ahead in terms of digital infrastructure. There is Chhattisgarh, who's Kerala. Kerala is the largest and the first state actually. Kerala runs this institute called KITES, which from the time I'm hearing, which is like 7-8 years back, they had 45 to 50,000 digital classrooms. Now that, and we had actually the opportunity to train about 90,000 teachers.
So actually in Kerala, you know what's happening? Reverse. From private schools, children are moving to government schools because these government schools are so good.
Yeah.
So the private publisher is losing business in
And
Kerala.
Kerala is a good example to segue into the language diversity in a country like ours, especially where 95% of the middle class parents, or any class parents, one of them is a working parent, one of them is a home parent. They usually speak only mother tongue, have only mother tongue entertainment sources. And the child goes out to school, learns English, comes back home and is able to practice the English only about 14 hours later. In fact, as soon as the teacher leaves the classroom, the class breaks down into speaking mother tongue. The accent on English is very good because we want to create children who can make very good decisions, be kind, be human, and be employable in the future, whatever stream they choose.
Inclusiveness.
How important is the thrust on English language teaching and learning and comprehension? And as publishers, how much of Indian languages do you use to bridge that diversity? Now, can we teach
Yeah, see, our
science
books,
and maths concepts using mother tongue? Are you putting in mother tongue guides in your books?
again, our books are for pan-India, so they are in English. And, but we lay a lot of stress on English because the child is learning science, maths, social sciences, environment, all through English. So English is not just a subject or a language. It's the medium of instruction. So we try to focus on the maths and science books in language which is understandable, which is comprehensible, which the child and the parent can understand. So in that sense, we encourage the teachers to go into the mother tongue for explanation. We have these mother tongue boxes in the books where the keywords are explained in. And because of diverse classrooms, say a school like Sardar Patel using Hindi up to class 5, I thought was not a good idea. Because they are children of bureaucrats, of bank officers, so they are from different states, different languages. I'm Hindi, I'm Urdu, he's Hindi, you're Malayalam. So you're all
Tamil.
studying in the same class.
But
whatever.
when we went to school, we had a first language English. I had to choose a second language, which could be a mother tongue. But because I grew up in Madras and we had a thing about anti-Hindi or whatever, my parents ensured that I studied Hindi. But you could do Hindi or Tamil. And we had a third language option of French or Sanskrit. But as we become more and more global as a citizen in the larger scheme, in the larger political sphere, and more Indians would be the youngsters who go and work abroad, we also need to introduce foreign language education into India in the way that the key foreign languages are also familiar with an Indian child so that they become global citizens, that is where. And in Pratham, you do a lot of local language interference as well.
As well as international.
As well as international.
For global citizens, I think English is the one you need.
I think English is just a medium. I mean, if I really talk about the scenario of a school-going child, I feel, and I again stress upon the use, and I will go back again to NEP and the opportunity to the Indian educational publishing fraternity, where you have a curriculum framework and you have now a playing field and a policy in place to say use local language. Now, what local language does and what my learning has been, it removes all fears, right? आपको इतना आत्मनिर्भर निडर बना देती है आपको. I mean, imagine if you have to even curse someone, मातृभाषा निकलती है हमारे जो है ना, माँ की बोली निकलती है, गाली भी देना होता है ना, तो you can't do it. No. I'm just telling you, like, just anecdotally, that this is what happens. So I think that's where, if you see the power of local language, the mother tongue is so important. And of course, English is required. And if you really look at the studies, they clearly say if your mother tongue understanding is, you transition into the mainstream languages very easily.
Because the bridge language has a lot of words. And I'm asking all these questions because eventually, that the previous panel was about how to grow readership and retailers, but very committed retailers are talking about how we can do that. The point is that we have to become a society that reads as a daily activity. That reading becomes a habit. We take that fear away from a child who doesn't pick up a narrative. It doesn't have to be, it has to be language agnostic. It has to be format agnostic. You read Ruskin Bond in Hindi or Telugu or an e-book, listen to as an audio book, bump into Ruskin as a literature reader like we have it in our textbooks or not. The act of being able to comprehend the world better by reading in any language, the responsibility fortunately lies on publishers who take a textbook inside the classroom. The fear of a large format text. It's just that what is sad is that between the teachers and the parents, I think, is we stop reading as a full-time activity the moment we get out of a classroom. When school ends, pretty much 90% reading stops. Children suddenly say, I don't read books, but they've been reading for 15 years. They've been understanding concept for 15 years. They will go become financial managers in the world's leading banks, but will not pick up a book to understand finance better. What libraries play an active part. You kind of briefly touched upon it. Even the best schools have one room, 1 hour a week, books locked behind shelves. The NEP says that every classroom has to have a library. What you're doing a lot, but as a private publisher, because you have access to your 30, 40,000 schools, what are the library initiatives publishers are creating or should be creating?
I told you about Ruskin Bond's Meghalaya story. So we do publish a lot of fiction, non-fiction, which is like he's saying storifying. So we had this series of 4 books for the primary, the story of water, air, and soil. This is by Dilip Salvi. So you remember those animation books, and they were so beautifully done by Atanu, and they were lovely books, but they didn't sell. We started putting those stories in the English readers, and this story is really good. So that thing came over there. As individual books, they did not sell.
Sure.
So Ruskin Bond goes into the Meghalaya State Board, he'll sell in.
No, only 1 out of the 10 principals I go to see on my daily work have actually a bookshelf in the principal's office. It is a bit sad that you don't see books as a visible element outside of anywhere else.
They don't
See,
read.
books in our country, if you're talking about joyful reading, I think it's a forcible read. People like, publishers like ours, sorry, but I use this word, like we don't even have spine in our books, right?
That's because you want to make them less expensive.
So having
very
said that,
accessible.
now, how do you get picture books accessible is, I think, how does an educator or a child gets inclined to a picture book is only by the cover, but cover means shelf square space, which means a lot of maths. And maybe unfortunately for an organization like ours, it doesn't really work. We get a pat on the back and we're shown the door. So, but I think my humble submission is and we have done this in the academic space. We've built a foundational literacy program, which is a plug-and-play digital reading program. We've implemented that in states like Chhattisgarh, for example. They were very happy to receive the program. We've also disseminated close to about 6 million books on ground in these 30,000 schools. So definitely there is an opportunity. I think where we need is to really, I think publisher forums should collaborate more with government agencies. Government agencies should open up more. Like I was telling you a few minutes back, preschool is an untouched space from an academic publishing standpoint.
Not really.
If you really look at the 0 to 6 years mandate of the government, it says that preschool education, Anganwadi I'm talking about because that's the area I work with, has to spend about 120 minutes of each day on preschool education. The reality is that not even 30 minutes get spent. Yeah. The outcome is the Asar report, that children are not able to read a 5th-grade child is not able to read a 3th-grade text because your absence of school readiness, because your language acquisition skills are poor, your vocabulary skills are poor, your sequencing skills, your thinking, problem solving, all of them.
No, like polio program.
I'll say, okay, take left.
Yeah, I hate it, when I watch a reality show and we do so much of poverty porn. Everybody is an underdog. We don't want to be a country where we say that I studied under a street light. I had to have a bath in the railway station because we didn't have a loo. I hate it when we show any country, especially us. There's too much accent on we came from nothing and we achieved something. It's the government responsibility to ensure that everybody has something, like you do polio program. You must do studying program. You must ensure books are part of it. So we have about 5 minutes.
Major stakeholder, I think no one focuses on is the parent.
Yes.
The child's education.
Yes.
Any parent education, any parent outreach is very, very,
Mike.
sorry, is almost absent. So nobody think, I mean, even the NCF and NEP don't lay much stress.
So the parents are out. Parents are only for GST and taxes,
in
by the way. in India.
2023 also, we have many first generation learners in even the good schools.
Yes.
So what do you do about them?
Yes. We have
parent
about
focus.
10 minutes. I'm going to quickly talk about one subject, which is something that we don't often talk about. Is the education publishing in India addressing difficult learning, addressing children with different abilities? Most of what we talk about is those who have, either through collaboration or through English language publishing, but our classrooms are now mixed in diversity. The accent is always on the 99% cutoff, and now the cutoff might become 101%, unfortunately. Is publishing doing enough as a country and as a government to address those who might have learning difficulties, who might have different challenges, who might be slow learners?
Except for a story here and there about inclusiveness. My friend Geeta, she moves around in a wheelchair. Those kind of sensitizing stories. I don't think there's much any of us are doing or can do in the restricted field we have to play.
Yeah.
And some schools in Delhi have a special section for special ability children, like Springdale's in Dholakua. They have a whole center, special learning center. But mainstreaming them, I think,
Yeah, because I don't know if any of you know,
rarely happening.
15% of Indian children have visual disability. I mean, as adults, we wear glasses, so we are also visually disabled. We can't read without a glass, right? But imagine 15% of children under 10 have a visual disability, but the parents will send them to a school because it's easy to get the child enrolled in a school.
Yeah.
But beyond that, there is no real access either through teaching, or even the teachers also ignore that child, unfortunately. So one of the takeaways is, so 5 minutes,
Yeah,
your closing comments on two. I'm going to ask a two-pronged question. Great intent, great commitment. We are a one-way street in publishing. You come in, you don't go. Do you believe, from an education sector point of view, publishing is getting the support that the government needs to beyond policy? And what is your vision for 2050?
Wow, that's quite a. I don't know. India works
No,
with a 5-year plan.
No, kids here will become 25-year-olds and become parents.
Yeah.
Kids you see outside. True. Are we going to leave behind an India that we can be proud of?
I am definitely confident that we would be able to do, and I can speak on my own behalf on the work we are doing. Since you spoke about the visual disability, I just want to touch upon, because we're talking publishing, 96% of the published material globally is not in the adaptable formats to Braille, right? Which means that they cannot ever have access to that content, right? So I think use of formats and fonts and things which are adaptable to this side of the curve should be done. Secondly, I also want to say that we've tried some of the things. I'll tell you, like, we worked with Central Board of Secondary Education, for example. We worked, again, because our hat is always joyful, so we had worked with them on a reading literacy mission for 2 years with 25,000 schools. And what they loved is, and I was with the chairman CBSE, and they said that we have, together when they work with NCERT, they call certain things as hard spots where children are not able to understand things. One of the things they quoted of the 250 things they had listed as hard spots was a decimal. That whenever a decimal is introduced, it's not understood. Fortunately, because we had developed storyfied STEM content, I had a decimal story. Nice. So having said that, attempts are being made to make experiences and the classrooms interesting, inclining, engaging. And if we have that and we continue to complement each other, I believe that we can definitely
Thank
do.
you for that, Atiya.
Something on Braille. All our books are available for Braille for free.
Sure.
We don't do ourselves.
Sure.
About the government support, the best thing the government can do is stop publishing themselves. Because they publish and sell for 70 rupees and our book is 35. I mean, NCERT started out as AIMS and now they've become Apollo. Now means the last 25, 30 years.
That's the quote of JBM.
Yeah.
No, but thank you.
No,
Thank you.
they've outsourced something to us again, which is a free model again.
Thank you for that. We have exactly 5 minutes if we have a question from the floor. Perfect. Thank you.
Hi. So I've been into education, in higher education to schools and preschools as well. I have a question here that when we talk today, we talk about probably the graduates who move out would be getting into 3 different professions at least in their life because of the quick changes that are happening. And we also have data which shows that about 50% of our graduates are really employable. And we also talk about the concept of school for life. So when we talk about publishing and supporting the education that's within the classroom, how do we really get the essence of education that happens outside the classroom built through publishing?
Do you want to go, Atiya ji, first?
Outside the classroom, he's there, Himanshu? I'm in
No,
the
are we
classroom.
making, if I'm to summarize the question, are we making, the child take away life skills,
Yes.
or is it only grades? And
It
what
is.
are publishing doing to ensure that the child is life ready, world ready?
We have done quite a lot of workshops with some people like Bishan Singh Bedi, where we talk about life lessons from sports. We have done with Tom Alter on learning poetry and drama through, learning language through poetry and drama. Those kind of things we've done, and we try to take it outside the classroom. But with a limited budget and limited time, so.
A lot of us, it takes a lot of us.
I think, I spoke about the outreach-related efforts. So of course, the intent is definitely that, if I may talk of the, what we try and deliver through the outreach sessions and our efforts and our content that we create. We had certain goals, like SDG is one of them, and where you have gender equity, you have life skills, like you mentioned. So there are many things, and we are very intentional about what we do, for who we do, what are we creating and writing for future.
So there's a lot of, even at Collins Learning, we're a textbook publisher ourselves. One of our courses is Global Perspectives. So the constant effort is to ensure that that our education delivers a child who is smart, definition of smart, has common sense, is kind, understands humanity, and is
Inclusive.
self-confident in its learning. What they choose to do beyond the classroom goes after that, and learning never stops for all of us. Which is why the bridge between when we let go of a child from a school, they stop access to digital stops, access to learning discipline stops, access to writing and solving problems stops, access to a library stops. You go from free books straight into having to want to buy a book. An 18-year-old child who gets out of school actually does not have access to books anymore, which is why the idea that the government should have 50,000 libraries. I mean, when I retire, I might not be able to afford a book regular time, right? And if I don't have a library in my city, how am I going to continue my reading as a habit that I've created for 50 years? So there's a lot that needs to happen at multiple levels to go back to your point about learning should never stop, which I think is a good closing comment, and thank you for it from the floor. The intent as we educate a country of people of our size is that all collaboration, classroom learning is the first learning that happens. The relationship between the teacher and the parent to continue that learning has to happen. And as both private publishers of joyful reading and purpose reading, the diversity in the catalog that we create, the hope is that the child never lets go of a book. So it's not just about holding each other's hand, but ensuring that that hand has a book in it as we go into the future.
I think I'll just say, learning shouldn't stop. So the ideal model is more like a Three Idiots model, right? Pakde gaye to school change, dress change, right? So that's how you become Funsuk Wangdu.
Good.
How many millions there's one for Supaguru?
Yes.
That's
Who's
okay.
teaching at IIT
I
Delhi?
said intent needs to
Is
be
there
there.
one more
Right.
question? I believe we have time for one more question. Yes, please.
I'm a poet now, but I hated poetry in school because narratives were forced on us as kids. Like, this is what the author is saying, learn this. but and this is for all subjects. So I was wondering if textbooks can be redesigned. I'm not sure if that's possible. It can be redesigned in a way that it encourages children the freedom to think and ask questions.
You
I-
don't
Yeah,
make it
effort
clear.
has been that.
Good question. Thank
Effort has been that all the while, and with poetry you touched a raw nerve. But I also feel poetry is really, I mean, teachers don't understand. We used to get requests for paraphrase of the poem. And they would say, no, the poems in this book are too short. So Prometheus Unbound, if you've given two stanzas, I said you measure with a ruler, 3 inches or 5 inches, they choose a book. If a poem is 3 inches in height, it's short. It's too simple. If it's a long one, it's too complex. And then we want a paraphrase. So now we've started doing this without asking. Every poem in every book will have a paraphrase in the teacher's book.
You want to talk about creative
No,
teaching?
yeah, I have a different, I mean, what
we
Atiya
have
ji,
to do
what
that,
Atiya ji and the academic publishing will definitely do to make it interesting. I think my perspective would be to educate the parent and the educators to give more agency to child.
The logistics of educating the parent.
Rather than saying ki I like it and my gray hairs and you do it.
In an ideal world, yes, but what are the logistics?
No, true. But one of the things we constantly fight against is parents and all of us who recommend books to each other to stop using the word age appropriate. I think we have to make access more so the child discovers the book for himself or herself. They choose what they want to read. We have to guide them, but I don't think we have to prescribe the access to a child. But if you're a poet now, you clearly went through very good education.
Yeah.
Don't forget what your teachers
And just
your
for her,
textbook-
we have poems in our science and maths book
Yeah, what
too.
your teachers and textbook gave them. But thank you very much. Thank you very much for that wisdom. Sobering as it might seem, education is a very good business in India and will continue to be. I close on that note. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All